You've heard the story. Lee Harvey Oswald, a crazed lone gunman, journeyed to the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, taking aim at the then President John F. Kennedy. He fired 3 shots, 2 hitting the president, with one of those killing him. This is the official story. But what if the official story is wrong?
Times have changed, Mr. Ferguson, and tactics along with them. In the next few months, you're going to see JFK do the following. 1, he's going to lead the Black Revolution instead of fighting it. Now, we all know what that means, don't we?
Damn right, a white backlash. Federal troops backing up the blacks, blood in the streets.
2, he's going to try to put across a test ban treaty with the Russians. And 3, he's going to try to pull out of Vietnam and turn Asia over to the communists.
Ridiculous. The American public would never stand for that.
Come on, Harold. The American public will stand for what it has to stand for. What it's told to stand for, or what it's educated to stand for.
The president's motorcade moseyed along its route, starting at Dallas Love Field Airport and ending at the Dallas Trade Mart, where a luncheon was being held in his honor. The president was to deliver a speech at said luncheon. The motorcade would zigzag into Dealey Plaza, a park that contained tall buildings, trees, shrubs, and knolls. This zigzag violated Secret Service protocol, driving the horny young president by buildings whose windows weren't secure and knolls so grassy. But this was all just a blunder on the Secret Service's part. President dead, commie sympathizer Lee Harvey Oswald killed him, then said assassin was killed by a nightclub owner, end of story. No! Let's back up a bit. Lee Harvey Oswald was born on October 18, 1939 in New Orleans, Louisiana. In 1955, while he was in high school, he joined the Civil Air Patrol, which is just a non-profit organization that helps the Air Force domestically. Oswald's Civil Air Patrol leader was a guy named David W. Ferry. Mr. Ferry was an airline pilot, a private investigator, a right-winger, so he was no Kennedy fan, had connections to Mafia boss Carlos Marcello, anti-Castro Cuban groups, former FBI agent Guy Bannister and his anti-Castro activities, and the CIA. The same David Ferry who was running a secret government lab trying to cure cancer. This project was set up due to SV40 or simian virus 40 being present in the polio vaccine. The virus is present in monkey glands, which is what the polio vaccine was derived from. It's known to cause cancer. I'm sure that's nothing and won't affect anything in the future. He was also gay, and it's speculated that he may have used his position in the Civil Air Patrol to diddle young boys. When Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested after the assassination, he was carrying a library card belonging to Ferry. Now you might be thinking, okay, they just need to talk to this guy and maybe he's dead. He was in the protective custody of District Attorney Jim Garrison, who was the main character in Oliver Stone's JFK film. Garrison questioned Ferry, which led Garrison to believe he was central to the plot to kill the president. David Ferry was released from protective custody and found dead the next day. I'm sure it was just sudden, fully grown adult death syndrome. Oswald joined the Marines in 1956. A core tenet of the Marines is that every Marine is a rifleman. A fellow Marine named Nelson Delgado told the FBI after the assassination that Oswald basically fucking sucked at shooting. Another Marine named Sherman Cooley said that, quote, "If I had to pick one man in the whole United States to shoot me, I'd pick Oswald." Oswald would frequently miss completely, and a red flag would be waved in front of his target, something the Marines call Maggie's drawers. There are 3 grades of marksmanship in the Marines: marksman, the lowest; sharpshooter, intermediate; and expert, the highest. Oswald missed completely one time, earning him the lovely Maggie's drawers. Then he barely got sharpshooter, then barely got marksman the 3rd time. So how did a guy who couldn't shoot the broadside of a barn hit a moving target twice in 5 seconds from 6 floors up? During training, he would talk positively about communism. The Warren Commission stated that Oswald was leaning towards communism before he joined the Marines. So why would a communist, or someone communist curious, join one of the most anti-communist organizations in existence? You could say he was a communist spy, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence that he knew any communists or suspected communist agents before he joined the Marines, but he did know anti-communists like David Ferrie. Anti-communists that would want to use a young patriotic American to help them infiltrate communist groups. It's also interesting to note that Oswald's politics did not sway into pro-communism until he met David Ferrie. So next I want to get into Oswald's time at the Atsugi Air Base. The base is in Japan and around 25 miles from Tokyo. Oswald was shipped there in August 1957. Also located at the base was the main CIA operational HQ in the Far East. It was called the Joint Technical Advisory Group because they're super secret spies. I can't just call it the big beautiful CIA base. Oswald's job was to monitor radar and make sure enemy aircraft weren't invading friendly airspace. This is where Oswald learned about the U-2 spy plane, a super secret project cooked up by Lockheed. The men would hear strange comms from an unknown aircraft while they were working, and they would even see it take off from the base. A fellow Marine stated that he saw Oswald taking pictures of Atsugi base. Oswald also allegedly made contact with Japanese communists while stationed at Atsugi, and even told a friend that he was hooking up with a Japanese hostess at the Queen Bee nightclub in Tokyo. While stationed in California after his stint in Japan, Oswald and his friend David Bucknell were drinking at a bar when two women came up to them to start a conversation. Oswald told his friend that this reminded him of a time in Japan where a beautiful woman had come up to him at a bar and questioned him about his work at Atsugi base. He reported this encounter to his superior officer, and the officer soon introduced Oswald to a plainclothes man who explained to Oswald that he could help his country by giving false information to women who tried to ask him about his work. He was also given money to spend at clubs while fishing for bitches. Pretty sweet. I don't know if these Japanese women were Chinese or Russian agents or whatever, or if they were simply selling the information to the highest bidder, but it's pretty obvious that they were trying to pry info about the base out of Oswald. Maybe because whoever they were passing information to already knew the US had some type of secret plane and wanted to know more. Okay, so while Oswald is at Atsugi base, chilling, fucking hot Japanese chicks, he gets gonorrhea and is treated for it. Now get this. About the infection, his medical records state origin, in line of duty, not due to own misconduct. Oswald got cock rot serving his country. How about that? But this does show that he was involved in some shit. He's getting that Japanese pussy. Also, kind of irrelevant, but John Wayne visited the boys while they were in the Philippines. And here's a photo of Mr. Wayne with Oswald in the background. When Oswald got back to the States, he began trying to position himself as a pro-Castro activist. He contacted the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, a pro-Castro organization, the Communist Party, and the Socialist Workers' Party. He proposed starting an FPCC branch in New Orleans. Eventually, he did. No one was a member of his branch except him and his alias, A.J. Heidel. So, just him. Oswald met up with some anti-Castro paramilitaries, trying to join their group. Then, a few days later, he started distributing pro-Castro pamphlets near their headquarters, which supposedly prompted a fight between anti-Castroite Carlos Bringuier, which really was just Oswald holding his arms down, daring Carlos to hit him. Carlos shoved Oswald, and Oswald pled guilty to disturbing the peace, while Carlos pled innocent. Oswald demanded to see the FBI while in jail and was trying to convince the FBI agent that showed up, Agent John Quigley, that he really was pro-Castro. Agent Quigley destroyed the notes he took during that interview. Later, Oswald and Bringuier debated Cuba and Castro on TV and radio.
I would not agree with that particular wording. However, I and the Fair Play for Cuba Committee does think that the United States government, through certain agencies, namely the State Department and the CIA, has made monumental mistakes in its relations with Cuba. Mistakes which are pushing Cuba into the sphere of activity of, let's say, a very dogmatic communist country as China is.
Mr. Oswald, would you agree that when Castro first took power, would you agree that the United States was very friendly with Castro, that the people of this country had nothing but admiration for him, that they were very glad to see Batista thrown out?
I would say that the activities of the United States government in regard to Batista were a manifestation of not so much support for Fidel Castro, but rather a withdrawal of support from Batista.
It seems like Oswald was creating evidence that he was pro-Castro, possibly to infiltrate pro-Castro and communist movements for whoever he was working for. On September 25th, 1963, Oswald went to Mexico apparently to try and get to Cuba and Russia. He linked his application for a Cuban visa with a Russian one, causing both to take longer. Some say that he was trying to hold up the process. Maybe he was trying to catch the eye of the Cubans and Russians, showing he wanted to try to get to the two countries, further cementing his false pro-communist stance, and causing the applications to get held up so he didn't actually have to go. Oswald had already defected to Russia in 1959 and stayed until 1962, which is a whole other web of weirdness. Alright, I'm going to derail this train of thought for a second to talk about that. I have to. So Oswald was suddenly discharged from the Marines in 1959, and shortly thereafter was defecting to Russia. He stayed until 1962. Then, when he got home to Fort Worth, where his mother, wife, and daughter were living, he moved his family away from his mother without telling her. Oswald seemed to get into and out of Russia with ease. He even stated to an American embassy employee that he was going to give the Russians classified data he had from working as a radar operator at Atsugi. Francis Gary Powers was shot down in his U-2 6 months later. Weird. Kind of. Okay, so I've seen some people say that he went to Russia as a spy, probably for the good old boys at Central Intelligence. I mean, that's kind of the only reason for him to go, unless he really was a communist, which I don't think is true. It is just weird that he was able to leave so easily after living there for 3 years. I mean, maybe the Soviets really thought they turned him and believed setting him loose in the US was a win on their part. Okay, back to the weirdness at the Mexican embassy. Oswald was there on September 25th, 1963. Well, on the same day, a Mr. Harvey Oswald showed up to the Selective Service Office in Austin, Texas, complaining that he couldn't find a job after his discharge from the Marines. He looked like Lee Harvey Oswald because he talked to Miss Dannelly, the Assistant Chief of the Administration Division, and after the assassination, she said that she recognized him. 2 other people saw Oswald in a cafe that day in Austin as well. And on the same day, a Miss Twyford got a call from Oswald between 7 and 9 p.m. He said he wanted to talk to her husband, who was the leader of the Socialist Labor Party in Texas, before he flew to Mexico. And it appeared to be a local call from Oswald. I'm not sure how it was determined that this was probably a local call. I tried looking that up, but if anybody knows, please let me know in the comments how you could figure out if a call is local or not in 1963. So there's an Oswald in Mexico and an Oswald in Texas. Well, a day later, Oswald shows up in Dallas with 2 Latinx gentlemen calling himself Leon Oswald. They meet with a Cuban refugee leader looking for what seems like funding, or at least some manpower, for some, quote, violent activities. Have you heard of Operation Northwoods? It was a 1962 proposed plan for the CIA to stage false flag attacks, like blowing up drone aircraft. Yes, they had those in the 1960s. Sinking U.S. ships and holding fake funerals for the sailors, and even fomenting Cuban terror cells within the United States to do violent activities. Now, Kennedy rejected this proposal, but they killed the fucking guy, so they definitely didn't give a shit what he said. I think the Department of Defense, along with the help of some choice 3-letter agencies, went ahead and started Operation Northwoods, with Oswald, or Oswalds, smack dab in the middle of it. Part of Operation Northwoods was to sow chaos and confusion across the United States, and having multiple men walking around as Lee Harvey Oswald caused a decent amount of confusion, as we've seen. Oswald is said to have not only killed the president on November 22nd, but also a police officer named J.D. Tippit. Oswald and Tippit had allegedly had an encounter before the 22nd though. On November 20th, around 10 a.m., Oswald was at a diner on North Beckley Street in Dallas. Oswald's rooming house at the time was also on this street. He had an altercation with his waitress about the way his eggs were cooked. He, quote, used curse words. I feel that. She probably brought him some cold food and then was a bitch about it. Gotta cuss out a waitress every once in a while and just put them in their place, you know? J.D. Tippit was there as well, as he is described as going there every morning. He shot a glance at Oswald as he chewed out the waitress. North Beckley was not in Tippit's precinct, so it's odd that he was there. If he had not been supposedly murdered by Oswald, then this would be whatever. Maybe he really liked the restaurant and would travel outside his district to go there, who knows. But the fact that he was the guy they say was murdered by the assassin that also killed the president the same day, and he's in the same restaurant every day, that's outside of where he's supposed to be working, and also on the same street that Oswald lives on, is suspect. Also, that was a Wednesday, so Oswald was supposed to be working. His work hours were 8 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. Why was he at a diner at that time? Or was it the second Oswald? Is the second Oswald the real Oswald or the imposter? Is there even a real Oswald? Quote, at 12:40 p.m., exactly the same time that a deputy sheriff, Roger Craig, and a woman named Helen Forrest saw Oswald get into a Rambler station wagon in front of the book depository, Oswald's former landlady, Mary Bledsoe, saw him board a bus 7 blocks east of the depository. Now you're probably thinking, they could have just mistaken Oswald for someone else. There were a lot of young white men in Dallas at that time. Reasonable assessment. But Forrest said if it wasn't Oswald, that it was his, quote, identical twin. The sheriff said that the driver of the station wagon that supposedly picked up Oswald was a husky Latin man. Should have checked the gay bars in Dallas. The fact that he was described as Latin makes me suspicious that he was Cuban, and we know that Oswald was involved with Cubans. Not at the gay bars. Maybe. A witness named Ruby Henderson said she saw 2 men on the 6th floor of the school book depository, one with a dark complexion. When Oswald got back to his rooming house, the housekeeper, Earlene Roberts, saw a police car stop in front of the house, beeped twice, like, then drove away slowly. The number of the car was 107. The Dallas police did not have a car with that number at that time. It had sold its car 107 over half a year earlier in April. The Dallas Police Department started using the number 107 again in February 1964. The Warren report says that Oswald left his home and eventually came across Tippit and shot him dead in fear that the officer had figured out who he was. Although the bullets found inside of Tippit did not match the shells found at the scene. After murdering Tippit, Oswald is reported to have made his way to the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff neighborhood. Warren H. Burroughs, or Butch as he was called, was a concession stand operator at the theater. Butch didn't see Oswald enter the theater, but he did sell him popcorn around 1:15. But the Warren report states that Oswald shot Tippit at the same time, 1:15. I don't know how accurate these times are. I mean, shit is happening so fast, and I don't know if it's likely the witnesses were checking the exact time when the shooting occurred, and if Butch knew the exact time he gave Oswald the popcorn, but what happened next is more intriguing and more convincing. There was around 900 seats in the theater, and not even 20 people present. So lots of room to sit comfortably by yourself. Unless you're a weirdo and go and sit right next to someone. It's like if you've been at a urinal and trying to pee, and some dude comes right next to you when there's a bunch of other ones open, and he keeps glancing down at your dick, and he's looking at you, licking his lips, and Oswald kept sitting next to people probably trying to make contact with someone, but that someone never came. This is when Oswald exited the theater and bought the popcorn from Butch. He then returned to the theater. One attendee, an 18-year-old named Jack Davis, says that almost 20 minutes after Oswald returned with his popcorn, police came into the theater. The police blocked all the exits but proceeded to Oswald slowly, like they didn't go for him directly as though they didn't quite know who they were looking for yet, or were acting as so. They searched the people between them and Oswald, almost provoking him to run. Researchers theorize that the plan might have been to get him to run so they could shoot him, possibly away from any witnesses. Then they could twist the story any way they liked. They could say he pulled out a gun and tried to shoot the police, because officially he was a crazy person and had already killed the President of the United States. Funny thing is, Oswald did pull a gun on them. As a cop approached him and went to grab him, Oswald pulled out his Smith & Wesson .38 and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened except the sound of a hammer clicking. It's reported that the firing pin on Oswald's gun was bent, causing it to not fire. The police arrested Oswald and took him out of the front of the theater. Butch, however, says something else happened. About 3 minutes later, he says he saw a man that looked just like Oswald being arrested. This man was taken out the back of the theater. Was there an Oswald double? If so, he could have hid in the balcony until the police arrested Oswald, but inadvertently got himself arrested. We can assume that if there was an Oswald double, he was working for people with lots of power, so getting him released would not be an issue. What about the officers who arrested the second Oswald? Wouldn't they talk to people about what they experienced? Surely some confusion would occur if two separate sets of officers claimed they arrested the infamous Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll get to that in a minute. Oswald was seen acting suspicious around a shoe shop. Suspicious around a shoe shop. Say that 5 times fast. The store manager named Johnny Brewer followed Oswald down the street to the theater and saw him slip in without paying for a ticket. He notified the ticket taker, Julia Postal, and she called the police. Maybe if the real or innocent Oswald was already in the theater, he might have slipped in before the second Oswald. I don't think he bought a ticket either because the ticket taker would have recognized Oswald as having bought one. The second Oswald could have been acting suspiciously to attract attention to himself, and ultimately the real Oswald, so an arrest could be made, and then went directly up to the balcony to hide, as Butch wouldn't have been able to see anyone coming in the theater and going up the stairs from the concession stand. A Dallas police detective by the name of L.D. Stringfellow sent a letter to his captain, stating, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested in the balcony of the Texas Theater. Oswald was officially arrested in the orchestra section, not the balcony. Maybe this is just a slip-up incorrectly stating where Oswald was arrested, or maybe it's a slip-up that correctly states that there was an arrest in the balcony that day. Remember that there could have been 2 separate sets of officers arresting a separate Lee Harvey Oswald, and how confusing that would be and cause more questions to be asked? Well, the captain that this letter was sent to is none other than Captain W.P. Ganaway, who was the head of the DPD Special Services Bureau and also a member of the 488th Military Intelligence Detachment, a U.S. Army unit in Dallas started by a man named Jack Alston Crichton, who served in the OSS during World War II, the OSS being the precursor to the CIA. Crichton claimed that about 40 or 50 men in the 488th were from the Dallas Police Department. So is it possible that the officers at the theater were a part of this unit and felt loyalty to it and would do what their command said to do, even keep quiet about a second Oswald? Yeah, I think it's possible. There was a sergeant in the Air Force named Robert G. Vinson. Vinson was stationed at NORAD, or the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and served as an administrative supervisor of the Electronics Division and held a crypto security clearance. Vinson had gone to Washington to question as to why he hadn't received a promotion after receiving outstanding job evaluations. It's funny because apparently he talked to his wife about this, and it sounds like she convinced him to fly all the way to Washington. Like he was talking to her and went, yeah, they didn't give me a promotion, but oh well, they're just slacking off, I guess. And his wife just nags him and bitches him out and is like, you need to go to them in person and demand a raise. If you don't, I will. So he went, on November 21st, 1963. And as he was meeting with a man identified as Colonel Chapman, he had a strange experience. It wouldn't be the last one. It's gonna get weirder. As Vincent was meeting and going over his concerns with Colonel Chapman, the colonel took a phone call and said the words, I would highly recommend that the president not go to Dallas, Texas on Friday, because there had been something reported. After Vincent had gotten his situation squared away, he went to Andrews Air Force Base to get on a plane back to Colorado. The plane he boarded at the base was, quote, unlike all the other planes Vincent had hitched a ride on. The C-54 bore no military markings or serial numbers. Its only identification was on its tail, a rust-brown graphic of an egg-shaped earth, crossed by white grid marks. Vincent entered the plane and noticed it was empty. He saw two men in plain coveralls that had no insignias or patches walking around the outside of the plane. The men boarded the plane and soon it took off, and Vincent was on his way home. In the middle of the flight, one of the two men's voices broke the silence, announcing that the president had been shot. Immediately preceding this, the plane banked left, changing its heading from west to south. Soon Vincent realized they were over Dallas, Texas. They landed on a dirt road and were greeted by a Jeep. Two men exited the Jeep and made their way towards the plane. The men wore beige coveralls, so to Vincent they looked like highway workers. There was also a shed Vincent could see that looked like something these types of workers would store tools in. Quote, the taller of the two men, 6 to 6'1", weighing 180 to 190 pounds, looked Latino. Vincent thought he was Cuban. The shorter man, 5'7 to 5'9", weighing about 150 to 160 pounds, was Caucasian. When Vincent watched the televised events from Dallas later that weekend, he recognized Lee Harvey Oswald as identical to the shorter man he had seen board the plane. Remember the husky Latin man and the white guy in the station wagon outside the book depository? The plane landed again that evening, on what looked like another base. The pilot, co-pilot, and the two men hurried off the plane, leaving Vincent behind. Vincent wandered out of the plane and eventually found an air policeman. Vincent asked the man where he was. The man replied that he was at Roswell Air Force Base in New Mexico. Told you. The air policeman told Vincent that the base was on alert and he couldn't leave until it was lifted. After a couple hours of waiting around, Vincent was told he could leave. He got on a bus and was home by the next day. He was watching the news covering the assassination just the day before, and he realized that the supposed assassin looked just like the man he had seen on the plane a day earlier, a man who was supposed to be in jail. In later years, it was discovered that the road that the plane landed on in Dallas was south of downtown Dallas, 1.3 miles from a restaurant called El Chico. Across the street from El Chico was a garage where mechanic T.F. White worked. Quote, T.F. White was a 60-year-old longtime employee of Mac Pate's garage in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. While White worked on an automobile the afternoon of the assassination, he could hear police sirens screaming up and down Davis Street, only a block away. He also heard radio reports describing a suspect, then thought to be in Oak Cliff. The mechanic looked out the open doors of the garage. He watched as a red 1961 Falcon drove into the parking lot of the El Chico restaurant across the street. The Falcon parked in an odd position after going a few feet into the lot. The driver remained seated in the car. White approached the car and saw a man looking right at him, a man he later recognized as Lee Harvey Oswald. White wrote down the license plate number and retreated back to the garage, as he didn't know if this could be the assassin the police were looking for. This occurred around 2 p.m. Officially, Oswald was arrested around 1:45 to 1:50 p.m. at the Texas Theater, 8 blocks from El Chico. Later, the owner of the garage got in touch with a reporter, Wes Wise, and told him that one of his employees had seen Oswald the day of the assassination. White was reluctant to talk about it for fear of repercussions, but Wise convinced him to tell his story. White told him what he saw and gave him the license plate number, PP4537. Wise reported the license plate to the FBI and was told that it belonged to a Carl Amos Mather and was on a 1957 Plymouth in his driveway in Garland, Texas. Mather did high-security communications work for Collins Radio, a major contractor with, drum roll, the CIA. Mather refused to talk to the FBI, but they did talk to his wife, who told them she was friends with J.D. Tippit. Alright. So back to the Vincents. They kept quiet about the assassination, fearing something would happen to them if they told anybody. That seems like a recurring theme. I'm sure there was a weird feeling in the air at that time. It seems like a lot of people already knew something was up. The FBI began questioning their neighbors about what the Vincents were like, obviously trying to see if they could keep their mouths shut. They both were even forced to sign secrecy agreements. Robert was told to go to the CIA headquarters in Langley for 5 days. He was interrogated and underwent psychological and physical tests, after which they offered him a job with the CIA. He refused and went home. A few months later, he was reassigned to Nevada, specifically Area 51. Told you. He was to work for the CIA there as administrator of supply for the SR-71. Vincent believed that there was no reason he should be sent all the way to Nevada for this job, as it wasn't anything particularly special. Vincent and his wife had suspicions that the CIA was keeping surveillance on them, so they would know if the couple started talking about what Robert saw. Vincent also learned that the flying saucers that people were seeing were actually US military tech, or so they said. One day while working at Area 51, Vincent saw a plane that had the same markings as the one he had boarded on the day of the assassination. An Air Force sergeant working with Vincent told him that it was a CIA plane. Vincent was finally able to retire from the Air Force in 1966. His lips were sealed for years after the incident, but in 1992, Congress passed the JFK Records Act, which stated that the government had to release files relating to the assassination. I mean, I don't think there's any files with any substantial information on the assassination, but it was a good try. He even volunteered testimony for the Assassination Records Review Board, but he never received an invitation for that testimony. The JFK assassination official story has a million things wrong with it. Just the instances surrounding Oswald are plentiful. I do think the amount of contradictions in this story point to a conspiracy. I mean, even the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations thinks so. I do think we shouldn't take everyone's witness testimony as fact, because people are freaks and will lie for attention, or they might have just missaw something. But a lot of these reports are backed up by other ones, and some even by facts. Maybe I'll make some more videos about other aspects of the assassination that just don't make any sense. So pretty much everything. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it does make YouTube want to recommend my videos to more people, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.